So we are presently, welcome to everybody who's here. Welcome to everyone who's on the phone. Let's get underway. So we're on Nun Aleph Amud Aleph. Once again, we need that activation energy for the reaction, what I call it, because otherwise we're going to be floating, we're twisting in the wind. There's a Mishnah, it's a Stam Mishnah. It tells us when we can use the Chalil, and that does not include Shabbos or Yom Tov on Sukkot. So not the first day of Sukkot, not on Shabbos Chol HaMoed. If Shabbos Chol HaMoed happens to be the first day of Sukkot, great, then you're going to have 6 days with the Chalil, and not the Chalil alone, but all the instruments, but that's the lead instrument, whether because it's first or it's the most prominent, whatever. For whatever reason, that's the symbol representing all of the instruments that will be used. When we started in earnest with the Gemara, I say in earnest because at the beginning there was a little bit of a discussion about what it's sho'eva, chashuva, right? A little word play, so to speak. Word play is the wrong word. They're trying to define what is it. Simchat sho'eva, simchat chashuva. But then we got down to what I would call the meat and potatoes of the Gemara, and that is the comparison between the Mishnah, Stam Mishnah, and a Braita that we have from elsewhere, in which Rabbi Yosef Rabbi Yehuda squares off against the Rabbanan. Rabbi Yosef Rabbi Yehuda says, and that was page 50b, about, what is it, 6 lines down, something like that. The last word, 7 lines down. Last on the line is Tana Rabbanan Taf Reish. The next line, Hachalil dochet Shabbat, Div Rabbi Yosef Bar Yehuda, Chachamim Omrim Af Yom Tov Eino Doche. The Chalil, says Rabbi Yosef Bar Yehuda, is even Doche Shabbat. Never mind, Yom Tov, Shabbat. And Chachamim say, no, not even Yom Tov. Right? It's a bigger chiddush to say it about Shabbat than of Yom Tov. Presumably, it seems to be what's going on. So that's the bright. That's all we have. That's all we have. Rav Yosef made an attempt to interpret that Braita. We saw that last time, his attempt, and also the attempt, the way in which that attempt failed. The first failure of the attempt was, you want to argue that here are the basic assumptions of the machloket, and really it's related and now having made those assumptions, now you want to see the nekudat machloket, the point at which they disagree, is what is the Ikar Shir Shel Korban. Ikar Shir Bekli, as Rabbi Yosef Rabbi Yehuda would have it, and therefore since it's part of the avoda that needs to happen while we're in the midst of offering the Korban Tamid, Korban Musaf, etc., ergo we have to sound the instruments. The other opinion, that of Rabbanan, Ikar Shir Bepeh, the main sound that we're meant to hear is the sound of the voices. The musical accompaniment via instruments is secondary, and therefore not permissible on, never mind on Shabbat, even on Yom Tov it's not permissible. Why the distinction between Shabbat and Yom Tov? Right? On Shabbat, so to speak, the stakes are higher. On Yom Tov, there is an Isra Malach. I mentioned it on Shabbos in Dvar Torah Drasha. There's an Isra Malacha, but it's not defined as the categories of Lamatet Malachot. It has a different character to it. We use the same pattern, but in terms of what the penalties are, they're differentiated. Ein kamakum lahach. If you know what I'm talking about, good. If not, hopefully you took something from this. But there's another point. And that other point is that, and this was, I credit Ira who asked me about this as we were flying into Mincha one day, and I gave him a short, it's a good question. What about the shofar? What about the chatzotzrot? We're going to see a Gemara tonight that's going to involve those. So aren't those also sounding? So that is true, but that's not the instrument, or those are not the instruments we're referring to here. Why not? The Torah in Parshat Ba'alotcha, Parak Yud, Pasuk Yud, it's easy to remember, 10:10, tells us that there should be at the time of the offering of various offerings, which Chazal learn is not just at those specific times, but pretty much all the time, you should be sounding the chatzotzrot. That's not this. This is on the side. This is that there should be a musical accompaniment. It's not referring to the mitzvah of chatzotzrot and shofarot. So Ira's question, if I recall it correctly, it was like, well, why are we using the example here of the abuva de Moshe? I want you to mention the shofar. The answer is the shofar is not part of the orchestra. It's a standalone. Also, as I mentioned to you,
metal. It's metal versus.
Yeah, but I'm saying, but the abuva de Moshe, remember, was a reed instrument. That was part of the whole discussion. And what?
It's an Ikar. It's
an Ikar, right? But it's not. It's the abuva de Moshe was an Ikar instrument of the what's it called, the orchestral pit. It's not really a pit. It's a platform. But the shofar, the chatzotzrot, that's not part of it. That's a standalone. The shofar and chatzotzrot had other functions beyond being sounded just at the time of the offering of various korbanot. The onset of Shabbat, I gave as an example, times of trouble, etc. But now we're talking about the other instruments that were on this duchan, this platform. So Rav Yosef, he wanted to argue, well, the real argument here is Ikar Shira B'Kli, Ikar Shira B'Peh, and Rabbi Yosef Yehuda says Ikar Shira B'Kli, the Rabbanan say Ikar Shira B'Peh. The Gemara said, no, you know what? We could have read this Gemara with one side of it or the other side of it, so that's kind of inconclusive. That was the first you call it a failure. I don't know what to call it, but the Gemara basically said, like, you haven't really proved your point that you were trying to make. That was Ad Khan for the piece about Rav Yosef by himself. Then along came the piece from Rav Papa. I lost my place over here. Then we had Dechia number 1 and Dechia number 2. We said Dekula Alma Shira B'Kli. We said Kula Alma Shira B'Peh, and we could have arranged the whole thing. Then we got to, that's why I'm a little bit out of sorts here for some reason. I'm not really sure where 1, 2. There we are. Then we got to Rav Papa. Okay. Then Rav Papa came along, and Rav Papa said, this whole argument over here is really an argument of the Tanaim, Ikar Shir B'Kli, Ikar Shir B'Peh, and I'll show you where it's from. And then he marshaled this other source about who actually plays the instruments. 3 opinions. The middle opinion was Rabbi Yossi. The first opinion was the Avdei Kohanim, Jewish, not Jewish. They're people who are Avadim. That's what they do. Number 2, that was Rabbi Yossi. It had to be Mishpachot Yisrael Miyuchasot. It's fine Jewish families who are of, I like to say, the infantry variety, GIs, not Levium, not Kohanim. Third opinion, Rabbi Chanina ben Antigonus, interesting name for another time. Antigonus was his father, Rabbi Chanina ben Antigonus, Levium. So the Gemara started to say, well, wait a second, if we think about this, Ikar Shira B'Peh means anybody can do it, because the instruments is background. Ikar Shira B'Kli, only Levium, because it's part of the Avoda. Okay, what is the opinion in the middle hold of Ikar when you say that it has to be a Jewish person who is of a Yisrael could do it? So the Gemara said, no, that was just to tell us that it had to be. We're concerned about the nafkamina is about going Olol from the Duchan to Yuchsin and Masrot. Remember, are people going to erroneously conclude the people they see standing on the platform are actually Levium? Are they going to know that they're just Yisraelim? Are they going to conclude that they are Levium and therefore they can, for marriage purposes? Are we going to say no? We're going to say whoever they are, we know who they are. Yeah, they're maybe they're an Eved. We're going to know what they are and who they are. So that was essentially what we saw last time. And Rav Papa essentially was also a refutation of Rav Yosef, since Rav Yosef was trying to argue that the very discussion between Rabbi Yossi Bar Yehuda and the Chachamim was on the question of Ikar Shir B'Kli, Ikar Shir B'Peh. And what he showed is, no, that's already a machloket elsewhere. And essentially, Kule Ama Shira B'Peh was a conclusion there. But the machloket about who's allowed to play the instruments is about what erroneous conclusions might be drawn by the lookers on who come to the mikdash and they see, oh, look who's up there, right? Like that person should be married to my daughter, but it turns out it's an Eved. Are they going to make that mistake? Or are they going to say, I'm going to give that person Masrot, and they're going to be very happy to receive it, but he's not really a Levi. So the answer is no. Ikar Shir B'Peh. That's the machloket between Rabbi Meir, Rabbi Yossi, and Rabbi Chanina ben Antigonus, and it's basically sort of leaving. It's just a sort of further refutation, I would say. It's not really a refutation of Yosef. It's just saying, and here's an alternate of like, you want to know Ikar Shir B'Kli, Ikar Shir B'Peh? I'll give you another alternate that actually answered this. That's the machloket was presupposing that everybody holds Ikar Shir B'Peh, and who's on the list? Rabbi Yossi. Tonight we're learning the third part, which is Rabbi Yirmiyah bar Abba, who fundamentally disagrees with Rabbi Yosef, and he says to Rabbi Yosef, I do not accept your basic interpretation of that Breita, which I'll come to in a minute. I think Jude had a question, a market question. Yeah.
Two questions, Master.
I'll repeat it.
One is, did they permit non-Jews in the Heichal?
No.
So
the Eved of a Kohen, I misspoke. It's a person who's an Eved. They're Jewish, but they're an Eved. Eved Ivri, yeah. It couldn't be a non-Jew. Yeah.
Nobody refers to Mizmor Shir Le'Yom HaShabbat. We say distinctly that they play Nevel, Kino, Ale Asor, Ale Nevel.
Yeah, it's a good point. It's not clear if that's a description of what's already happening or if that's prefiguring what will be happening in the future.
There's maybe any difference.
He's saying like if they're saying
the instruments and
yeah. I don't know that a chapter of Tehillim is necessarily marshaled as an example of describing what happens in the Beit HaMikdash, or if it's speaking in a poetic language about what's going to be in the future. In other words, most of the Mizmor Shir, the Yom Shabbat, the rest of it doesn't mention Shabbos at all. So Ayin Sham, a number of years ago when we studied it in the Soul of the Siddur Shir on Tuesday mornings, we did a whole thing from Rav Hutner. What is it talking about? It's about the Olam Haba, when Tzadik V'Ralo, Rosh V'Tovlo will be solved, and then there will be the playing of various instruments. Alehi Gayan Bechino. Before that, Alei Asor. You were mentioning the Asor. Those the Asor, the 10-stringed instrument. There's all these allusions. But your questions are good. I'm not aware. I just don't know. I'm speaking mamash out of ignorance. Maybe there's somewhere in Shas they darshan and having to do with the instruments being played, but it doesn't seem like it's not brought here as an example for Shabbat. Yeah. Okay. Something else? Okay. Let's dive in though. Yeah, we have our work cut out for us. It's not so long, but it's instructive. Yes, someone else had a question. Larry?
Repeat the question.
Oh, I'm sorry. I said I was going to, and I already broke my word. Sorry. The question, Judah's question was, every Shabbat, we have Mizmor Shilim Shabbat, and we mention instruments that are being played. And it sounds like it's describing instruments that are going to be played in the Mikdash. So I was just pointing out that you heard that part, yeah? I speak out of sheer ignorance. I don't know if in Shas, those words are darshaned to explain something about a current reality in the Mikdash. My understanding is it's talking about something in the future that hasn't happened yet, and that the words, Alei Asor, it said the pasuk right at the beginning, yeah? No, Alei Navel, Alei Gain Bechinor. Yeah, thank you. All right, I need a little help. But it's talking about something that hasn't happened. According to Rav Hutner, it's something that's going to be in the Yemot HaMashiach. Okay, that was it. Okay, but what Rav Yirmiyah bar Abba says is he says to Rav Yosef, okay, so we're on Nun Aleph, Amud Aleph. I'm telling it to you outside first so we could see it inside. He says, I fundamentally reject your basic understanding of that Breita that you tried to interpret on 50b. I say, says Rabbi Yirmiyah bar Abba, that the machloket in that Breita on 50b, that was the basis of our discussions, all these last shiurim, is actually a machloket about Simchat Beit HaSho'eva, and whether you can play the instruments on Shabbat and Yom Tov or not. Now, the end of the puzzle we already have. Stam Mishnah, we passed into the Stam Mishnah, so clearly we're not going to follow Rabbi Yosef Rabbi Yehuda. We could have forecast that anyway. But Rabbi Yirmiyah bar Abba says, what are you telling me this is some machloket about generally Shir Shel Korban? Remember, that was the whole discussion until now. What do you do on a regular Korban that you're offering on Shabbos? Can you play instruments, yes or no? That's the machloket, Rabbi Yosef. And until now, that was the assumption of the Gemara. Rabbi Yirmiyah bar Abba undercuts that, and he says, that's not what the machloket is about. And if you look at the words sound eerily similar to the words in our Mishnah. You know why? Because this is the machloket that's not in a Mishnah, it's in a Breita, because you know what they put in the Breita? The bottom line. What's the bottom line? You can't play instruments on Shabbos or on Yom Tov for the Simchat Beit Shueva, period, full stop. What you're looking at when you're looking at that Breita is something that was earlier, when Rabbi Yosef Rabbi Yehuda was still squaring off against the Chamim. Why did they quote Rabbi Yosef Rabbi Yehuda in the Mishnah? Lo yodea. The answer would be because they pass like a Stam Mishnah. Sometimes they put the dissenting view. For whatever reason, Rabbi Yehuda Nasi felt that in this case, Rabbi Yehuda's view should not even be mentioned. It wasn't worthy of being mentioned. I don't know the rationale. I'm not enough of an expert to understand like the workings of how Rebbe put it together. So now we're on this page. Where are we here? 1 second. We're not that far down on the page, actually, but it moves pretty quickly. Rabbi Yirmiyah bar Abba, if you're looking in your Vilna Shas, on the left-hand side, Tosfot, Dibur Matchil, Lamechatzim v'Lameshorim, it's 4 lines up from there. The second to last word is V'Rabbi Yirmiyah. On the beginning of that line is Miduchan Bein Liuchsin Bein Lamaser. That's from the other. That's from Rav Papa from before. Now we're up to part 3. So what I tried to show you in this limud together is phase 1, phase 2, phase 3, and all of it. Again, if we were like in grade school, something the highlighter, if I had a highlighter, goes on 50b on the Tana Rabban Hachalil Docho. There's a little, in my Gemara at least, a superscript aleph with a chupchik because it's quoted from the Tosefta. Yeah, so that on 50b on the facing page, that's what's been analyzed in 3 ways. Rav Yosef, and then Rav Yosef basically collapsed under his own weight. Then Rav Papa came. Now Rav Yirmiyah bar Abba, and Rav Yirmiyah bar Abba is not is not accepting even of what Rav Yosef said. So Rav Yosef gave the initial interpretation. So there was a challenge and a second challenge. Then Rav Papa chimed in, which was also a challenge to Rav Yosef. But they all assumed that Rav Yosef's basic assumptions were correct. Rav Yirmiyah bar Abba says your basic assumptions are not correct, and that's what he says here. Rabbi Yirmiyah bar Abba amar machloket b'shir sho'eva. They're arguing about whether you could play instruments on Shabbos or on the first day of Sukkot, on Yom Tov, for Simchat Beit Sho'eva. That's what it's about. Rabbi Yosef, Rabbi Yehuda Savar, Simcha Yitera, Nami Doched HaShabbat. For Rabbanan Savri, Simcha Yitera, Eina Doched HaShabbat. Aval, B'shir Shel Korban. Sorry, this is Simcha Yitera, meaning for extra joy. We play instruments. Eino Doma, singing and dancing. We're singing and dancing when there's an orchestra. So they play the instruments, or they don't play the instruments. Rabbi Yosef Yehuda says yes. Chachamim say no. Aval B'shir Shel Korban, Divrei HaKol Avodahi, V'docha Et HaShabbat. But when it comes to the Shir Shel Korban, everybody agrees that it's part of the avoda and it is docha Shabbat. And of course, here you could fairly ask, well, what does Rabbi Yirmiyah bar Abba hold? Ikar Shira b'peh, Ikar Shira b'kli. And the answer is he doesn't tell us. He doesn't care. Now, why doesn't he care? Because he's saying either way, whatever the gzeira d'Rabbanan is against playing instruments on Shabbos, it is waived in the Mikdash. Because in the Mikdash, Gezerot Rabbanan don't obtain when they conflict with any aspect of the avoda. So to sum up, Rabbi Yirmiyah bar Abba attacks Rabbi Yosef twice. One, he says the argument of that Braita is actually against the Mishnah itself. It's the same thing as the Mishnah. Just the Mishnah, Rabbi Yosef erased Rabbi Yosef Rabbi Yehuda's opinion, just took it out. But that's really this is like the pencil sketches from before, so to speak. And number two, that everybody agrees that a Shir Shel Korban, Tamid Shel Shachar, Musaf, whatever it is, you can play the instruments. You know why? It's part of the avoda. You're going to tell me Ikar Shir Peh, Ikar Shir B'kli? That doesn't matter. That doesn't matter because the whole issue at hand is an Isser D'Rabbanan, because we don't want people to by accident fix it if it breaks, etc. That's not a concern when it's playing against the ambiance and the experience of the avoda. And when we do the avoda on Tuesday, Wednesday, and Friday, whatever day of the week, we have instruments in the background. Shabbos, we do the same thing. We're not going to show a distinction. It's not he doesn't care. That's not his machloket issue. So he shows, and he says, and you know what, I'm going to show you the proof of what I hold. Meitvei, let me show you a Braita. Shir Shel Sho'eva, Docher HaShabbat, Divir Rabbi Yossi Bar Yehuda. So bingo, I found over here, I have a Braita. I brought a manuscript. Enter Exhibit A. It says right here in my version, it says Shir Shel Sho'eva. See, v'rachachamim omrim af Yom Tov eino docha. Ta-da! Tiyufta to Rav Yosef. Tiyufta. That's a knockdown proof to Rav Yosef. Yeah.
I'm getting myself in a little bit of a tizzy here about this. The phrase Simcha Yitera. Why would an extra Simcha docha anything? And because the implication is this sort of extra, and
like it's superfluous.
Well, superfluous is not a good word, but it's not required. Maybe be a better word. And so, and it's the first time we've had that phrase as it relates to this.
Well said.
So I'm not quite sure. And I look for Rashi.
Rashi says something. Did you hear the question? Should I repeat it?
I heard it. Oh, you're talking to
We're good? Okay.
Right.
Rashi Dibur HaMatchil. Rashi Dibur HaMatchil. Hachi Garsin Rabbi Yossi Savar Simcha Yitera Nami Doches Shabbat. It's around where we started. So Rashi says, Hoil v'simchat mitzvahi. The simchat mitzvah is the simchat beit shoeva that we're going to do the mitzvah shortly. Yeah. Uvechalil ein isra malach el shvut ba'alma. Therefore, to enhance the simcha, like it's part of exactly what I just said now about the avoda. So there is a special avoda on Yom Tov, and the mitzvah, the special avoda Yom Tov is simcha. All right. I don't know if anyone read it, but I wrote a letter to you on Friday about Simcha Shal Mitzvah. I quoted the Rambam Shilhi Hilchot Sukka V'Lulav. What does he write there? There's an avoda gedola called Simcha Shal Mitzvah. So on the holiday of Sukkot, which is all about Vayita Ach Sameach, it's about great Simcha.
But don't we say
play a little extra music? That's the next Mishnah. Yeah. Right. Anyone in Simcha never saw Simcha in their whole life. We're going to come to that. We won't come to that now. That'll be after Pesach. But yeah. So let's go. Okay. So the point is, we will have to come back to it when we talk about the Simcha Simcha Beit Shoeva. The point is like it's enhancing the simcha in some way. And the Rabbanan say, come on, no, you can't play it on Shabbos or Yom Tov. And that's actually how we paskin. But Rabbi Yossi is like, but there's something here, yeah? So Lema, so the Gemara says, Lema Shir Shoeva Hu Deplige, Avashisha Korban Divrei HaKol Docher Shabbat. So the fact that they're arguing about the Shir Shel Shoeva, that's what their argument is. So now let's also conclude that the Shir Shel Korban, everybody agrees that it's Docher Shabbat. Yeah. Lema Tihave Tiyufta to Rav Yosef Betarte. Say that it's actually a knockdown proof, not just against Rav Yosef, who thought this argument was about general korbanot. Is it Ikar Shira Bakli? That's not what this is about. More than that, even his claim that everybody agrees that a shir shel what did he say? That there's the machloket is over the shir shel korban. That's not even a machloket. Everybody agrees. I already told you this outside. I'm just reading it inside. So Amarlach Rav Yosef. When you hear Amarlach so and so, it means they didn't actually say it. But some later Amora wrote what they would have responded. Yeah, they're like sort of playing Lahavdil, the chess game for the player who's already left the room, but they know the style and they know what to do. So Amarlach Rav Yosef, Pligi B'Shir Shel Shoeva. The argument here is about Shoeva. It says Shoeva. V'hu adin lekorban. So therefore, of course, they're arguing also about korban. If they're arguing about Shoeva, which is a lighter thing, of course they're arguing about korban. V'hai Kamifu B'Shir Shel Shoeva. So the Gemara says, no. The fact that they're arguing with Shir Shel Shoeva, au contraire, L'hodiacha kochod Rabbi Yossi Bar Yehuda, Afilu Shoeva Nami Dachi. Yeah, maybe the fact that it came up with Shir Shel Shoeva. Sorry, this is a Malach of Yosef. The Shir Shoeva is the argument because look how strong Rabbi Yossi Bar Yehuda is. Not only for Korban does he think it's true, even for Shir Shoeva, which is not really a mitzvah, it's a Shir Simcha Yitera, even there, right? So v'hakatani zehu Chalil Shel Beit HaShoeva. She'eno dochel lo Shabbat v'lo Yom Tov, right? If you look at the Mishnah, right? What did it say? Look at the Mishnah back on 58. V'shisha zehu hachalil shel Beit HaShoeva. Zehu. This is the Chalil of Beit HaShoeva, which isn't docha Shabbos or Yom Tov. Now back to the Gemara, right? V'hakatani zehu chalil shel Beit HaShoeva. She'eno docha lo Shabbat v'lo Yom Tov. Straight out of the Mishnah. Zehu de'eno docha. This is what will not be docha Shabbos and Yom Tov. Aval de korban docha. But of a korban, the Stam Mishnah says it will be docha. Money. Who is that according to? Name Rabbi Yossi Bar Yehuda. Ha'amar Shir Shoeva Nami docha. So it can't be Yossi Bar Yehuda. He thinks Shir Shoeva would also be docha even Shabbat, but the Mishnah is against him, so we're not following that. Elalav. No, rather. Rabbanan, the Mishnah must follow Rabbanan. We knew it did, but I'm sorry, I gave you the end in mind first. But the Mishnah equals the opinion of Rabbanan in this Braita. V'tiyufta to Rav Yosef betarte tiyufta, right? This is a refutation of Rav Yosef twice over. Done. This is the equivalent in math. Lavdo say QED. Drop the pen, drop the mic, drop the pencil. Done. Rav Yosef, you didn't get it. Rav Yirmiyah bar Abba says, I found another Braita. It's a variant text, as the academics would say, lahavdol fe'avdol, but it says it's about Simcha B'Shoeva. So I'm telling you now, it's also a refutation of your claim. There's even a machloka about Shir Shel Korban. Everybody agrees that Shir Shel Korban is Docha Shabbat. How do we know? Because the Mishnah, which is the Stam Mishnah, said, Zeu HaChalil Shel Beit HaShoeva She'eno Docha. What about the Chalil that's not of the Shoeva? That is Docha. Now, the end of this Gemara, even though there's just a few lines left, it runs relatively quickly. The Gemara asks, "My time a demand to Omar Ikar Shira Bakli." What is the opinion of that one? That who holds that the Ikar Shira Bakli? Now, where is this coming from? It's like left field. It's the leftover. It's the Shirayim from the discussion before about Ikar Shira Bakli, Ikar Shira Bapeh. The Gemara sort of doubles back and says, "Remember that other discussion, which is now closed." But there's one piece that's left. What was the source for Ikar Shira Bakli, Ikar Shira Bapeh? They just thought it was a good idea. It's not going to be that Mishnah about, the Avdei Kohanim, Yisraelim Yuchasim, or Levium, because that we already saw was proving one side of the ledger. But where did this idea come from? That's the Gemara wants to know. And I'm saying I've learned enough Shas to be able to say it authoritatively, but in my experience, oftentimes that'll be left over. The Ikar, meat and potatoes, was the middle. Before it, there was a little discussion about the words. Shoeva, Chashuva. Now the end point is Sotaka. What was the source of what we talked about? Ikar Shira Bakli, Ikar Shira Bapeh. So the Kol Psukim. Dichtiv. Vayomer Chizkiyahu lehalot ha'ula leha mizbeach, uve'et hechel ha'ula hechel shir Hashem v'achotzotzrot v'al yedei klei David melech Yisrael. Yeah, it's a long pasuk. This is the dedication of the Mikdash by Chizkiyahu HaMelech, great tzaddik. So he refurbished, he did away with the culture of Avodah Zarah that had preceded him. And it describes that he went up and they started doing the Ola, they started the song of Hashem, and the Chatzotzrot were going, and also the instruments of David, the king of Israel. Chatzotzrot, remember I told you, are separate. They're in a separate category, separate, distinct mitzvahs. So my timer, Demanda Amar Ikar Shira B'Peh. Okay, now what was the rationale for the one that said the mainstay is the mouth, the singing, the vocals, and the instruments were a sidebar. Dichtiv Vayihi Ki Achad Lamechatzrim. It's read Mechatzrim, but in the Kri is Lamechatzrim, V'Lamashorarim, Lashmiya Kol Echad, Lehalel U'odot LaShem. Right, so it quotes as a whole pasuk. The point is, V'ida. So in other words, those who are blowing the Chatzotzrot and those who are singing. Oh, Chatzotzrot, it's his own category. Shorim, that's who's getting mentioned, the singers. Right, so it's one voice. Kol Echad. V'idach Nami Haktiv Vayomer Chizkiyahu. So of course, this is the classic crossover. A, B. So why did B not say A and why did A not say B? You have to quote each other's pasuk and explain what they didn't like about the other pasuk. So right, so V'idach Nami. Where are we? V'idach Nami Haktiv Vayomer Chizkiyahu. So Hachika Amar. Hechel Shir Hashem B'Peh. First they started singing. Al Yedei Kli David Melech Yisrael. Libesume Kala. When it said at the beginning of the pasuk, why did it headline? The Chizkiyahu said when they started the Ola, they started the Shir Hashem. That was the voices. They blew the Chatzotzrot, and on the side, accompanying it was the Klei David Yisrael Libesume Kala, to sweeten it, to make it nicer. They put an accoutrement on the side. Okay, but he says it's not Ikar Shir B'Kli, it's Ikar Shir B'Peh. And I don't like that you mentioned the Klei David. I showed you from your pasuk the Klei David Melech Yisrael was a sidebar. So okay, so now the other side. V'idach Nami Haktiv Vayihi Kiachat Lamechatzim V'Mishorim. It mentions Chatzotzrot in its own category, and the Mishorim, the singers. That sounds like pretty obviously B'Peh, right? Hachik Amar Mishorim Dumi de Mechatzotzrim. Why did the two words adjacent to each other juxtaposed? To tell us that the singers were like the Mechatzrim. Ma Mechatzrim B'Kli. Af Mishorim B'Kli. When it said the singers, didn't mean literally the singers, it mean the people who made the Shira happen. How? Through a Kli. Ad Kan. Okay. Yes, but when we say B'Peh, we mean that there's vocal cords.
It's not a guitar.
Right. But wait, there were string instruments as well, though. There were definitely string instruments, different things. The Chinor, they had it. Yeah. It was there. Unfortunately, we're sort of it's not unfortunate. We're out of time, but I'm sorry, but that'll leave us interested to come back after Pesach. I don't think we're going to learn now. Next week, it's already in Chodesh Nisan. There are other shiurim taking place. You're welcome to come to them. The Haggadah and the other things, but God willing, after Pesach, when we resume, Balin Latova, we'll get together on Nun Aleph and Mid Aleph, and we'll start the new Mishnah about Simchat Beit Shoeva. Be a great joy, and then we'll finish the Masechta not too long after that. We'll figure out what we're going to do after that. Okay, Ad Kan for tonight. Chag Sameach.